Welcome everyone to a gameplay overview of Atlantic Fleet. Atlantic Fleet is a tactical naval combat simulator. It's set during World War II. So the sortie sizes you're going to find in this one are typically about 3 to 4 ships versus 3 to 4 ships. You might have a few fleet encounters when you're playing as a submarine, but usually it's a lot of convoy fleets, so you'll be facing a lot of merchant ships. I'd say this is pretty historical in the sense that the battles fought in the Atlantic were typically just 2 ships against 3 ships or so. You had very few engagements which were, the Germans didn't have a huge concentrated fleet that they were seeking to engage the British with, so this stays relatively true to that. First thing I want to mention about the game from not about the game itself, but just my commentary on it. It is an iOS port, which means it's designed and it's really meant for tablets. This can be noticeable from time to time, cause a few small aggravations, but I think for the most part Killerfish has tried to port it well to PC, and they've also released a few patches to improve on things. So as we see the Nelson, or maybe the Rodney, floating behind us, it's a great ship to be floating, we'll go into a single battle to demonstrate that. This is the way I'll set up the rest of this. Just showcase single battle. If you don't like the single battle, there's absolutely no reason to get this game, because the campaign mode and the Battle of the Atlantic, which is really what I would consider the actual campaign mode, those are just a shell of a strategic map based around the single battle mechanic. So if you don't like the single battle mechanic, you're really not going to enjoy this game. I think I'm going to choose the Battle of the Denmark Strait because it's a nice, kind of short engagement. We'll play as the British, especially because I've been playing a lot as the Germans in my own campaign. And we'll go ahead and see if we can sink maybe just the Prince Eugen. My thoughts are that the full battle might take too long, so we'll just try to sink the Prince Eugen. The Bismarck is a very sturdy ship, and it's very hard to put her below the seas, below the waves. She's a tough guy. Now, when you are actually in the single battle, there's things rotate in terms of turns. So right now it's the British turn to go first, but I move all my ships. It's not interdigitated or interlocked or interdispersed. All my ships will go before the Germans get their turn. And that's how this game always works. You don't have, it's not like there's a initiative that you have in other games where one team has a really high initiative destroyer and that'll go first, and then maybe a light cruiser on the other team will go. No, so I get both my ships to move first. Now, when you actually get into an individual ship's turn, that's broken down into 2 phases. First is your movement phase, so we can see I can go port, starboard, full speed, flank speed, stop, all back, etc. And this is where you can kind of see the frustration of the tablet mechanic. They did eventually add, I'm going to use the keyboard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but that was only patched in. You can see that this game is really meant to be touched. You touch 2/3 with your finger, or you drag this left or right with your finger on a tablet. And the worst place that this is really not bad at all, using it for turning, because you can also use J and K to go 5-degree increments, which is all they allow you to do. And you can use, I think, U and I also. So J, K, U, I are the keyboard shortcuts for all the well, it's basically the only keyboard shortcuts besides the 1 to 6 keys on your keyboard, not your numpad. What do I actually want to do? For my movement phase, we all know that World War II, for surface action, your main advantage is if you can get off your full broadside. So I'm going to go 2/3 and I'm going to move to port. That's going to give me a full broadside on Prince Eugen. So now this brings up the second phase, which is our combat phase, where we actually get to fire our weapons. Now, when this happens, you have this frustration of dealing with the elevation. Now, you can use U and I. So let's imagine that I wanted to get to 6. I can tap, I can tap, I can keep tapping. But there's no fine, okay, there I got to 6, but there's no really fine control. And the small 0.1 degrees can be important, so it's a little frustrating to deal with. And I find it's much more accurate just to drag. So if you drag almost left and right, you can see my mouse is going more left and right, then you're making a very small adjustment in the vertical, which ends up being how I fine-tune my elevation. Now, what we actually want to choose for elevation this is our spotter information. So we've selected the Prinz Eugen, and they recommend for us an elevation of 23.8 for our guns. So not knowing anything better, we're going to trust that. Once we fire next turn, we'll see that there are two other mechanics which are much better, much more helpful for getting our elevation accuracy. One is the splash chart here, and really the most accurate is just using the map. And I'll explain that more when we get a chance. So 23.8, we've selected the 51.6 degrees from our bow, so off bow to our stern, to our starboard, and that's what we're going to fire. Obviously the left-right is really easy, you just click the ship and it's set. They don't really make you guesstimate. There's no movement because it's turn-based, so while you're firing, the ship is just standing still. That's the turn-based mechanic of it. You don't have to lead your shots. So that's all I want to say before we have our first volley. Shells away, and let's see how we did. Now, spotting information usually isn't this accurate. That looks... Ooh, we got one hit. We even started a fire. Usually your first shot is going to miss. We're going to do the same thing with the hood here. Full speed, and I'm going to turn her as far to port as possible. Try to give me a nice broadside on the Prinz Eugen, and we're going to be able to get all of our main batteries to bear. Very good. I can't use any of the spotting information from the Prince of Wales, so our spotters are not connected. So I'm going to use once again the spotting information for this guy. 24.7 is what they say. Which seems, we can already guess that this is overshooting because I was using 23 for a ship which is further away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that information to just drop this down to 23.7, a full degree lower than what they recommend. And let's see how that works. Because I think this is 15-inch shells, and we were using 14-inch shells on the Prince of Wales, which means that these should technically travel farther. Let's see how that works out. Yeah, it looks good. In fact, I think we landed almost a perfect barrage. So that does not bode very well for the Prinz Eugen. Let's see how the Bismarck and Germany responds. Her first volley, very short. And a few explosions on the Prinz Eugen. She probably wishes we were going after the Bismarck right now. She might actually get a very accurate... that was good. She bracketed us well. I don't know if she'll even see the beginning of her next turn, though, because we do have a lot of very high-caliber weapons trained on her. If you are interested in knowing what kind of damage you've caused, or even what kind of damage is on your own ships, all you need to do is double-click on the ship. So I double-click, Prince of Wales. Here's all the combat information. We have 10 14-inch guns, so 4, 2, 4. And 16 secondaries. You can see these secondaries here. But I don't think I've ever used my secondary guns. Maybe one time against a destroyer, but usually I'm the one who's outgunned, because that's more fun. So we have really high belt armor, turret armor, deck armor. Actually, 5-inch deck is not amazing. 7 inches is what the Bismarck has. It's definitely enough to stop most shells, but when you're in a battleship versus battleship engagement, that might not do it. These 4 aircraft doesn't come into play for us because we don't have any air power, which I'll demonstrate in a second combat video before we conclude this overview. So my second turn, same as the first really. I'm going to keep turning maybe just 10 more degrees to port to make sure I am getting my broadside off. And let's see if we can... Whoops, I messed this up. Since I didn't... for some reason I wasn't selecting the Prinz Eugen when I turned there, probably because I was clicking around. We didn't gain any better spotting information. But you know what, that's okay, because at this point we can use our map. I'll have to demonstrate the splash marker because I neglected to keep the Prinz Eugen targeted. It's not giving me information on it. We can see that last time I overshot by a little bit. So, to be honest, if you wanted to bring out a ruler, this is actually a linear scale. So if 10 degrees gets you here, then 15 degrees will get you 50% further in distance. So if you want, you can actually just calculate that this, let's say this is, this is 23.8. And you could measure the distance from here to here, measure the distance from here to here, and just use a simple ratio to find out what this 23.8 should drop down to. Now I'm just going to eyeball it. It looks to me like this should drop down to maybe 22.4. I'm just gonna wing it. It's 22.54, whatever, something like this. I'm not gonna be so pedantic as to actually take out my ruler, but this will probably put our guns more or less on target, and in fact, yes. And we got a really good belt waterline hit there. That's gonna cause a lot of flooding. She may actually be sinking. So this is a better indication of what I wanted to say, that there's a plus here. If you continuously target a ship for multiple turns, you'll get this better spotting information. Basically, your spotter's examining the ship, its course, its heading, whatever, its speed, and it's giving you a better idea of how you should fire your guns. Now, I don't know if the Prince Eugen is long for this world anyway, because she is listening very heavily to starboard. And we do have this perfect beltline hit. Now, mind you also, her armor is a lot smaller. It's about a third the armor of these other battleships, because she's just a heavy cruiser. So we can see that her pumps are damaged, which means that her flooding control is going to be even worse. And, not relevant, but we have knocked out her anti-aircraft. We can see that her top speed is 32, and she's probably only going, 23 knots. Typically, ships do move close to their max speed in this game. So when you see that they're not moving close to their max speed, it's probably an indication that they're flooding. So now that we have the opportunity, I think we'll be able to sink her on this turn. We'll continue to turn our, we'll turn to port and get off. So the what I was saying is the the more pluses you have, I think you can get up to 5. It means the better your spotter is relaying information to you. And this is what I'm talking about. You can see from the splash chart. If you consider using the map cheating, which I think it's fair enough if you do, because it is kind of cheating, you can use this as your spotter's splash chart. They examine where the shells fell into the water, and they say, oh, that was 150 yards too far, or 300 yards too far, or more. And how this actually works is if you're here, that means don't change your weapon fire by much. These two means you're either a degree too far or a degree too short, and these means you're 2 degrees too far, too short, or more. So you got to adjust by about 2 degrees. Again, I think the best way of doing it is just by looking at the map. It's saying we should drop down by a degree, that we're a degree too far based on the current ship, where it is and where our previous shot was. I think that a whole degree seems a little too much to drop, so we'll probably just drop down to, let's say, 23. And this might be the end of the Prince Eugen. So 22.9, I mean, again, that fine-tuning, I'm not going to mess around with it too much. Let's just see how this does. Looking good. 2 more hits. And we were a little bit far, so we probably should have dropped the extra 0.3 that I did. Now the Bismarck's turn to retaliate. And just over. So the shells whizzed over the head of the hood. Prince Eugen's still able to fire. Listing heavily, but still returning fire, and it looks like, nope, just overshot. So let's see again by hitting F2. So now we actually have the 1+ because we were targeting the Prince Eugen for this full turn. I'm just gonna go 5 degrees, keep moving like this, and let's see what kind of damage she has. Okay, now her spotting, her torpedoes, propulsion is down. She's down to 10 knots. A lot of problems, and I fear for her situation is only about to get worse. So 22.4 was this. Considering this is how much it was to drop by 1.4, we probably only want to drop by like 0.3. So I'm going to call this at 22.1. Actually, I'll go to 22 flat. Very good, and shells away. So this is the whole mechanic of the game. I think that after the Prince Eugen sinks, we'll go ahead and exit this combat because I think you get the idea at this point. Actually, we overshot there. That's unfortunate. So we'll do the same thing here, 5 full. And let's see, now the 2 pluses means that you can start to trust this elevation, gun elevation, a little bit more, but I've always found that it's just much more efficient to use the map. So they recommend for us 22.2. Actually, that seems about right because this is 22.9, which definitely overshot. And they recommend us come down by at least a full degree. I'm going to go down to 20 flat. And shells away. Let's see if we can end the Prince Eugen this turn. That looks good. Ah, there she goes. Okay, Prince Eugen is sinking, and I'll probably just call this combat video to a close here. If you want to sink the Bismarck yourself, feel free to pick up the game if you enjoy this kind of combat. What I would say is there is a campaign mode, which let's just jump into that right now. I'll just explain that, and then I'll give my kind of final thoughts on the game. So there is campaign. This is not a campaign in the normal sense that we think of it in terms of like Grand Conquest or strategic map, etc. This is really just a linear playthrough. So in this British campaign, I've gotten only 6 stars through. I fought 6 battles. The first battles are kind of silly. You're just fighting like a large freighter, impossible to lose. The first combat one is number 3. You fight the Penguin, and the one I'm on, I think I'm fighting 2 submarines. So this is just kind of like a challenge system, I would say. Less a campaign than more of like a challenge system where you increase your challenge from 1 to 19. Where 19, I assume, is going to be something like fighting the Lions or the Hoods or the King George V class ships, like the Prince of Wales. The mechanic for this is that you start with, I think, a little bit of renown to buy one ship, and then every time you sink the ships in these different missions, you gain renown. So if I wanted to go into this mission, when I want to choose which ships, I can actually click this button, and I can actually buy another ship with the renown. So it costs 62,000 to buy the Queen Elizabeth class, but maybe if I just wanted to get a Flower class Corvette, this would only cost 1,000 renown. So that's the way it works, and I feel like it's pretty simple. It's kind of fun to play through maybe once, but it's not really a campaign in the true sense. The real campaign is the Battle of the Atlantic mode. Now I'm going to go into the Germany playthrough. If you're interested, I have the full Germany playthrough on my channel. It was a really fun campaign, but there are some negatives. First of all, I want to mention the iOS does not allow you to drag this map very easily. So you can see, I don't know if you can hear that I was clicking there a few times and it wasn't dragging. That can end up being a real source of frustration. It's something really simple, right? Just being able to drag your map. So I feel like you're supposed to push on it with your finger and move it around, but for some reason it doesn't always register your mouse clicks, like there. Okay, it's really not registering my mouse click there. So it's a little frustrating. You have to click in the right spots to drag. How this campaign works is that you start with, this will be totally blue. This is your victory meter. So technically I've won the game in only September 1940. So I wouldn't say this game is terribly challenging. Also, it kind of highlights the overpoweredness of submarines. And how it goes is, I don't recommend you play the British, by the way. Do not play the British in this campaign mode because all you'll be doing is sinking submarine after submarine. It's very boring. But if you play as the Germans, you can choose to go submarines, or you can also choose to go kind of a more surface warfare oriented, which is what I recommend because it's a lot of fun. In fact, I ended up winning this so quickly, I barely had time to get my Bismarck classes out. I think they only had 1 engagement and were damaged, and now they're in the port repairing. So, I mean, again, how this works is you gain victory points as Germany by sinking convoy ships. And the goal is just to fill this up. The British goal, obviously, is to prevent you from doing so. So playing as the British is really boring, but playing as the Germans, you put your submarines into line. If I go over to here, it'll show you where the majority of convoy ships are, just the likelihood that you'll be able to sink some convoys. It moves in half-week turns. So every half week you have a chance to engage convoys or get involved in some kind of surface warfare. I really enjoy the surface combat, and it was really fun to get the Bismarcks out. I was actually having a lot of fun with the Gneisenau and the Scharnhorst, moving them around. We had some really epic engagements, so again, I highly recommend you check out that series if you're interested in seeing more about this game. But basically, it's a very shallow campaign. All you're doing is killing convoys to win, and you kill warships to gain renown. And it's the same way as it worked before. You go to your shipyard, you gain renown. You can see that I was decimating the British in this game, so I have a lot of renown. In fact, one of the things I don't like about it is that you can't build any ahistorical ships. So say the Scharnhorst class battleship, you want to build one. Well, I already have the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau, and because there's no other historical battleships in this class, I can't build anymore. Even if the ones I have sink, I can't rebuild. That's also true of the Bismarck. So I already have the Bismarck and the Tirpitz out. Now I can't build any more Bismarck classes just because there was no other historical ones. And it's kind of funny to pair that, considering they do have the semi-ahistorical H-39 class battleship, which never really saw action, was not ever completed. So it's a little interesting that they would have these in the game, but they wouldn't allow you to use them. But they won't allow you to build other ahistorical ships, because these never really saw action. So that's one complaint I have about this game, is you can't build more ships than there were in real life. But that's kind of ties the hands of the Germans, who don't have that many ships to deal with to begin with. It kind of shoehorns you into a anti-submarine play style, which unfortunately is kind of boring because submarines are so overpowered. So that's what I'd say. The campaign, this is my takeaway point. It's definitely worth playing once. It's a lot of fun to play once. But after that, you'll find that maybe it's not so interesting, and you can see that since I beat the campaign by 1940 of September, it's not terribly challenging either. So last thing I want to showcase is just for fun. I want to show off that there are submarine warfare, and there is also air combat. So you can bring air power to the different engagements. I'm going to give the British a destroyer, some kind of battleship. I'll just grab whatever. Let's go with a Nelson, because I really hate her. The rallying cry of my Battle of the Atlantic playthrough as Germany was sink the Nelson. She ended up being a real thorn in my side. And then I'm going to give them one, maybe a C3. Excuse me. I want a really slow one so that my submarine can catch up. 18, no, not a submarine though. 16.5, here we go. Liberty class freighter, perfect. So the 11.5, I'm going to leave this just so that my submarine, which I'll get, can catch up with them very easy. And we'll use a Type 9, it's pretty standard, so let's add this. And there we go. I'm also going to add a bunch of Condor bombers just so I have the opportunity to sink the Nelson. And we'll go ahead and attack. So this will showcase the submarine warfare, which is a lot of fun to play through at first, but after that it can be a little repetitive. And I find things get very repetitive as the Germans. So I'm going to turn pretty hard to starboard. I'm going to chase after this Liberty class with flank speed. But we're not going to actually target her yet. We're going to be targeting the Nelson with, not torpedoes, but airstrikes. So let's go ahead and launch our first airstrike against the Nelson. The wind is moving this way, so I actually want to go directly this way. And I think that's perfect. So let's go ahead and launch our first bomber. I'm going to wait till it gets to be about right here. Start launching bombs. And this is the air mechanic. So dropping bombs like this, the level bomber type strategy, I might have... We'll get some hits off though. That's the easiest one to hit with, and you can see I missed with a bunch anyway. So they are doing a move all because they don't know that there's any enemies around. I mean, they see the airplanes, but that doesn't mean anything to them. So I'm going to keep going until we actually sink this guy, because I really hate the Nelson. So it looks like the wind is pushing our bombs a little bit to the left. So I'll go ahead and lead a little bit like this, and let's see. I want to launch it a little bit later this time. Maybe now. And this is dive bombing, or this is level bombing, but you can also do dive bombing, which maybe I should have actually missed with that one quite a bit too. Yeah, and that's it. This is you use that. Let's see, am I close enough to actually launch? So unfortunately, we are really far away, so it's gonna be hard to launch torpedoes. I'm gonna move flank speed. Maybe we can get a little bit closer. Well, if nothing else, we can at least sink the Nelson, which I always admire sinking the Nelson. Let's get this way over there. Probably have to go right away. Nope, too early. That will end up hitting as soon as it gets over there, though. I'm gonna miss with like 6 of them first, though. So just 2 hits. This is really not the best way of doing dive bombing. For better instances of dive bombing, you could just see my playthrough in Battle of the Atlantic. I was much better, because I don't really care right now. I'm just trying to demonstrate this game mechanic and then get out of here. So one more time, sure, why not? Let's do this. Wait a little bit longer, and that should be the end of her. Okay, so my final thoughts on the game. I would give this probably a 3 out of 5. Not even a 3.5, but actually a 3 out of 5. Because it's, I mean, that does not weight it based on how much it costs. Wow, the Nelson is, yeah, I would say, listing very heavily, and there she goes. She's starting to sink, going down. It actually registered as a Beltline hit one of those bombs that we missed to the side. So they do model splinter damage. So I would say it's a 3 out of 5 for a game because it's not going to keep you engrossed for very long. You'll probably do the single campaign playthrough as I've done, and then after that, that'll be it. You won't really be interested in playing much further. So I'm going to show you torpedo launching here. We're currently at this bearing, but it recommends 351. We'll go over to 351, and you just click on this to set this as the launching for your torpedoes. We'll go ahead and launch a bunch like this, a full spread just to see if we can hit. And then hit fire, the torpedoes go. And the interesting mechanic is they move in turns. So you actually can have some weird situations where your torpedoes should hit, it seems, but they don't because the ship moves enough. And so this will be a perfect example. It looks like I'm going to hit, but they get a full chance to move, which means they'll probably move completely out of the way. Now we'll just keep heading playing speed. I'll hit 6 to do nothing. If these torpedoes hit, and they won't, so maybe... Oh, actually, it seems like they've detected me with sonar, because now they're not doing move all. The destroyer's moving separate. So this will showcase a little bit the anti-submarine warfare aspect of the game, which is heavily favored for the submarines, because you don't have any restricted vision. It's not like Silent Hunter 3, which the submarine combat does remind me of a lot, but yeah, let's just keep going then and see what this guy has in store for us. He'll probably start shooting at my periscope soon. These torpedoes useless. There they go. And that torpedo mechanic where they stop every 3,000 yards or whatever it is, that's for submarines. I mean, different torpedo launches, like destroyers and aircraft, they all have different torpedo ranges, which I'm sure you can look up online. But it's a kind of a frustrating mechanic. It doesn't... You try to lead the shot, but you have to lead it based on your knowledge that, for example, if the ship is within 3,000 yards, you should aim directly at it, which doesn't make sense. You're not leading the target at all. But your torpedoes are going to arrive before they get a chance to move. So that's just the way it is, that you shouldn't lead your torpedoes at all. And we'll see that in a second. I think he'll begin to fire at me here. Nope, he still doesn't see me, but unfortunately he's moved into torpedo range, so... Oh, he's still... That's actually still a little bit further away. So we'll go one more turn. Will he see me now? Still no. Well, that's unfortunate for him, because that'll be the last thing he ever did. Once they're within 3,000, you just... Like I said, we don't have to lead our target at all. We're just going to launch our torpedoes directly at him. One here, using the V as in Victor key to launch or to select our targeting solution, and then boom, boom, down she goes. I've only seen a destroyer survive 2 torpedo hits, maybe 1 out of every 30 times, and there we go, 2 out of every 30 times now, because she is actually still alive. Well, if she's not within 1,000 yards, she's not. We'll go all back, and we'll launch one more torpedo at her, which I assume will bring home the prize. Boom, and there she goes on slow sinking. So that's going to call this this gameplay overview to a conclusion. I'd say 3 out of 5 because you're not going to get a whole lot of replayability out of it. However, what I think is that what that doesn't say about the game is that it is a lot of fun. And what I can imagine is watching like an interesting footage on some World War II naval battle, or seeing an episode on World War II on the History Channel, something like that, and having it get me really excited to go into a naval combat situation, then I can imagine I will absolutely load up this game again. But I don't think that this is going to be a staple for anybody's go home from work and play. It's not going to be a very engrossing campaign after you've played once, and I think it'll just end up kind of collecting dust in between those bursts of enthusiasm you get about World War II naval combat. So that'll conclude this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope it was helpful. If you're interested, like I said, you can always just check out a full Battle of the Atlantic gameplay on my channel.